And just, I would ask you, where do you relax? Do you go to the beach or just in the garden with a cup of tea or coffee and go out with a fishing, fishing out there and just recharge that way? This is the way I recharge. I love going in the forest, and I love the forest, and even better if it's in the mountains and you pop out of the forest and have these glorious views. And I feel extremely fortunate that I'm living actually in New Zealand, where we've got just 1.5 hours, 2 hours to get to the ranges in the Kawikas or Wahinis, and we've got these wonderful walks through the forest. And that made me think that actually forest was quite a big part of my life, all my life. And then you wonder, you look at the forest here, and it's the dream of, I guess, every German or a lot of Europeans to come here and go into nature in New Zealand, and you all know that by the amount of tourists that come here. But it was a lot of, I had forest in my day-to-day life, and I wondered, where does that come from? We've got 5 million people in New Zealand, and Germany is just a third bigger in terms of area than New Zealand, and we've got 80 million people. Where does the forest come from? Really? Did I have forest, or am I just making something up of my previous life? And if I compare that, the forest is about a third in New Zealand. And Germany equally has about a third of the landmass in forest. But there are two big differences. One of it is that New Zealand's got about 8 to 10% forestry, with mainly radiata pine. Germany has, and I turn it around now, only 2% of natural forest. The rest is somehow managed as forestry or used in other ways. But I can't say native forest. We make the distinction between forestry and native forest in New Zealand. But in Germany, we do have the forestry in native plants, so native trees, and it will be a whole range of trees with the oaks and elms and linden and birch trees. So it's actually quite a beautiful forest as well, but we only have this tiny fraction of natural forest. And then still, I would still have to travel. I live right up in the north. There's not that much forest. Why do I have the feeling that I grew up in a forest? I played in a forest. I had forest every day. Well, that is probably the characteristic of that in Germany we've got Stadtwälder, which is city forests. And towns and cities would have a big chunk of real forest. And I would commute to the forest, this is where I studied, and just take my bike and cycle through the forest, and there wouldn't be any roads through, 1 or 2 roads, that's all. So my daily commute was through forest. And when I go back even further, where I grew up, my first 18 years, there was just a little town that has about the population of Napier. And still we had high-rise buildings, so not really a lot of space for urban area, but a huge forest. So I would hop on my bike, and that's the town center, and I would live down here. And it was always forest. I played in that. And we've got kindergartens, they are the forest kids. And they don't even have a building. They just get dropped off in the forest, and they get picked up in the forest all year round. So that would be kind of my commute. And I'd pop out at the train station and park my bike under hundreds of other bikes, so I don't have to compete for car parks. And so I had forest every day. And I would cycle along these Mühlenau, the little stream, which is a typical lowland stream. And I wouldn't see the water for the forest, because the bike path would be a bit further in and the roads are even further away. So it's quite nice of a commute for towns and cities. You always find areas like that. But enough about me. Let's look at the fish. Why would a fish care about forest or trees? I mean, it can't climb in trees and it can't cycle through a forest. It does care quite a bit about trees, and that is for several factors. One of the factors is temperature. If you don't have any, well, if you do have shade, like in the Mühlenau, you would have a fluctuating temperature. Daytime is a bit warmer, nighttime is a bit cooler, and just in my example here, it fluctuates around 15 degrees, and the blue line is kind of the water temperature. And it stays well below 20 degrees, which is kind of a critical temperature for fish and water bugs. Now, if we look at another stream like this, which doesn't have any trees or shrubs or anything else to shade it, water gets too hot too quickly. Now, policy comes up and says, well, give me a guideline. What is actually cool enough to, have a good habitat? That's a bit of a tricky one, because we don't have temperatures like an aquarium, which is always the same. We have to find a point to say, okay, this is too hot for the fish, but how do you do that if you constantly have this maximum temperature during daytime and lower temperatures during nighttime? And in this example, you would lose the heat at nighttime quicker in an unsheltered stream, and it would pick up more heat. So actually it still fluctuates around 15 degrees, and you wouldn't be, if you just take an average, then you wouldn't pick up the difference that it actually reaches critical temperature in the unshaded stream. So we had Cox and Rutherford, two scientists, that said, right, they tried actually in an aquarium with fluctuating temperature as it is natural, and they found that it isn't worthwhile looking at the maximum temperature either, because if you think of a candle and a flame and you flick your finger through it, it won't harm you. But if you really go slowly through the flame, oh yes, that hurts. So that's the same thing. If you've got a temperature above a certain threshold that is there for several hours per day and day after day, that is where the fish really struggle, or the bugs. So Cox and Rutherford said, how about we take the midpoint between the maximum and the average temperature, and then we've got a time where actually for a couple of hours per day that temperature is above this threshold, and that's called the Cox-Rutherford index, and this is what we report on in our SOE reports. It's not the maximum, it's not the average, it's the Cox-Rutherford index, which means the temperature is above that threshold for several hours a day. So we put out loggers in our streams across the SOE sites in summer, and then Jay actually wrote an R script already that picks up 5 consecutive days, the hottest 5 consecutive days in summer, and then calculates the midpoint between the average, daily average and maximum. So that is what we get now. But temperature is not the only problem if the sun is just, if there is no vegetation around the streams to shelter it from the sun and the heat of the day. It's also the aquatic plants, because with all that light and the warmth, they just grow rampant, and they grow all the way through the channel, and that creates several problems. First of all, it actually has an effect on flow. It just can't flow through that quickly, and if there's a heavy rainfall event, then it may all create a flooding. But also aquatic plants, yes, they produce oxygen during daytime more than they use up, but then they're still living organisms. And if there's no sunshine and they don't do photosynthesis, then they use up oxygen out of the water column. And at nighttime, that would mean that until the early morning hours, oxygen levels can go to really low critical levels. And my fish is not very happy because they don't get enough oxygen. So that's the next problem with these aquatic plants. And also because they're growing all the way through the channel, they're actually attracting sediment, and that accumulates even more. So that's negative feedback that again has effects on nutrients and so on. So actually it's all going belly up if you've got too much sunshine, too much heat, too many aquatic plants. So that doesn't work very well, and we've got that problem in the Karamo streams. 70% shade or more, that's what we need. Then we would have better temperatures, and the plants grow slower as well. They don't grow quite to such nuisance levels. How do we achieve that? Well, we had the answer already. My fish is happy when there's a lot of vegetation around it. But there is a bit of a problem. Trees? Seriously? Close to the streams? That doesn't work. So there are several caveats with that. First of all, if you plant too close to the water edge and it rains really heavily, the problem is it may pond up because it's just creating a blockage and it just floods all the properties around it. So you have to consider that you have to plant a bit further away from the stream to allow for flood flows to come through. Second one is property owners. Seriously? I'm not going to plant a 20-meter high Caicatea around my stream. It's going to shade out my paddock. That doesn't make sense. So we have to think about how high the plant have to be as a minimum to achieve our shade target. That was the second one. And the third one is, well, actually there's still a lot of sediment coming through from the headwaters from somewhere else, or I have not quite achieved the shade yet and macrophytes are still growing, the aquatic plants, then I need to dig it out. I need access to my stream. So I can't plant both sides in big trees. I will have to kind of plant so low on one side that I can still reach the stream and dig it out or do maintenance of some way or form. That makes it a bit more complicated, doesn't it? First of all, we've got different stream widths, we've got the different orientation to the sun, we've got the other things to think about. And we had Kit Rutherford from NIWA who made us a model and looked at all these different factors. What is the minimum plant height that we need to plant when we want to achieve 70% shade? And what we have to consider is, what is the stream width? The wider, obviously, the harder it is to shade. What's the stream orientation to the sun? What effect does it make? Then you have to consider that the sun moves, so the shade is always moving around. We need an average to estimate what is actually, how long does the sun or the light access the stream and how long do we have shade and where? And then, is access to the stream bank needed? What's the season? Is it spring or autumn or summer? That always, that's different how the sun moves along the sky. The setback, and then the drip line, how far can they reach out, the plants? So all of that has to go in a model. And obviously the output is not going to be simple. So Kit produced this report, and it was curves to different azimuth and time and season, and more curves about different planting settings, and it was pages and pages of tables and output, and we thought, that's really hard to communicate. You wouldn't file through all the tables and try to find what the axis of your stream is and how it works. So we said, Kit, actually, do you have something simpler than that we can tell the community and everyone else? He said, yeah, I've got a rule of thumb. And his rule of thumb was the plants need to be about as high as the stream's wide. That's simple. Why did we do all that modeling again? I mean, seriously, it took months. So actually, it's not that simple. Yes, it is simple, but you risk not achieving the aim of 70% shade, or you may plant higher than you actually need to. It is a bit more complicated. But still, it's a great rule of thumb which you can start. He said, okay, let's go through more categories, but still keep them fairly simple. First of all, plant both banks when you can. It's much easier. If you do that, then the north-south stream, the tree height can be a bit lower than the stream width. So if you've got a 1 meter wide stream, just plant flexes that are 80 centimeters high and they reach over the channel a bit, you will achieve your 70% shade. But if you've got an east-west stream, then the trees must be higher than the stream width by 50%. So 1 meter high stream, 1 meter 50 shrubs. Why is that? Actually, for me it was counterintuitive. But if you think that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, it's actually hitting the stream channel twice a day, whereas if you've got the north-south one, then it's just midday that the sun actually directly hits the stream channel. So it is much better protected from if you plant on both sides on a north-south stream. What helps a lot if the stream's not straight. That's not for a lot of the drains where you want to get rid of the water. They are dead straight, so you can calculate with that. A meandering stream is much easier to shade because there's always some shade on the stream channel. That's the both banks. Here come the one bank. If I can only plant one bank and need to reach over with a digger, then there is a bit of a problem with the north-south stream. Obviously, you would plant the north side and you think, oh, that's well protected from the sun, but it's not really. So you may not achieve the 70% shade, but you always have to keep in mind that it's not an on-off switch. It's not that if you've got less than 70% shade, it's suddenly all going belly up. It is still slowing plant growth. It's still keeping the temperatures a bit lower, so it's always worth planting anyway. The east-west stream, the trees suddenly have to be 3 times the width of the stream and have to be overhanging as well to protect the stream from the sun. So it makes it a bit harder to really plant only one side of the bank. But you can always think about things, how to get it better. So if you've got on the other banks vegetation that actually hangs over the stream channel a bit more, or if you do have a bit of a meandering channel, so the taller, the more meandering, and the more overhanging plants, the more shade you create. Right, and it's all in there. And this is not, so this is the brochure that is on the web page of HBRC, and that's not my brochure, it's actually Nicola McAfee who's done that with Darien Z. That's her major work, and it's already a brilliant brochure which tells you about different plants and categories and how to keep them alive and fencing. It was focused on sediment and bacteria coming into the stream and protecting stream banks. And all I did is actually adding what is so crucial for us in Hawke's Bay with that amount of sunshine and warmth, shade, how to create shade. So we added all that information about shading stream channels into Nicola's brochure. And there's someone else who did some magic with the data, and that is Daryl Hall, who created a map out of the categories from KIT's results. And you can actually look at the different stream reaches, and he looked at the orientation and the width of the stream and the depth. And you can click on it and you can look at the right bank and left bank, how you have to plant it up in shrubs, or are flexes enough for smaller streams, or do you need to plant actually higher trees. And there's one piece of the puzzle still missing, and that's the setback for flood conveyance. So that puzzle is still coming there, and then we can provide that as well, that it's accessible for everyone, but we need that information, how much setback is needed for flood conveyance. So that's kind of the last thing that should go in there. Yes. So we've done a whole lot of good when we plant along the streams. And the funny thing is, it's not only temperature and aquatic plants, which I focused on today. All of that has kind of effects on all of the other factors to keep a stream healthy and the fish happy. So it's actually all interlinked. The aquatic plants affect the oxygen and the flow and the sediment, and that again has an impact on nutrients. And actually, planting around streams is a key tool to get the condition better. I actually promised that I have a third, so it was my perspective, the fish perspective, and the bird perspective. And I stumbled across two articles and I wanted to go to the next thing, why forests are important. And these articles were just mind-blowing, but it's already 20 minutes, and I just have to stop here. So, and it's not even my expertise, but it was just an interest, and that forests play another role as well in the climate and microclimate, and very fascinating. But I don't get to that. It's, the time is up, so just to wrap it up, beech forests in the Kauikas and the beech forests in Germany. Thank you.
Yeah, if you have questions, just put your hand up and shout them out. Yeah.
Yeah, Gavin?
Thank you very much, Sandy. Very good. In some of your slides, you spoke about stream banking farmers and whatnot, but what would be different in an urban waterway environment with all the riparian planting guidance? And same but different?
It's even more important because you've got usually roads that constrain the space even more, and it's a good question. Probably still about the same. You could still go by the rules and look at how wide is the stream, which orientation does it have, and what's the minimum requirement, and see how big the plants get that you're intending to plant, if that obstructs anything in terms of, yeah, I don't know. But good question.
I just see lots of grass, ferns and whatnot.
Well, it is.
To work, and it's like a missed opportunity.
It's right, but I think there's even more crucial that you have the flood conveyance. So especially in an urban area, how many houses would be affected if you actually flood? So it's really looking at the volume that the stream needs. And if you've got more space, then yes, definitely missed opportunity. Just plant it up. And it has so many co-benefits, and the runoff from the roads as well, just slowing that down, coming to the stream and filtering a bit. There are so many advantages in planting rather than just having mowed banks.
Just got to convince the engineers.
Yeah, I mean, they just have to calculate that they make sure that no flooding is happening, and if we've got that information, we have to find the common grounds. Yeah.
So what, obviously most of the streams are on private land or farming land? Is that
No,
majority?
it's not. I wouldn't know the proportion of it, but we own a lot of the lower areas.
Oh, okay.
And the farms, the private areas, would be more in the headwaters. And I think, you know, this is where you want to start, because the small amount of, the small volume of water, it's like a cup of coffee that cools off quicker, and it's just a cup of coffee instead of 20 liters of a bucket. So if you start in tiny streams, to keep them cool or to cool them off is much faster, and also the vegetation, you don't have to wait for 10 years until it grows high, because it's just already the grass that would, you know, just a flax bush would shade it. And that's private owners, so if they plant up there in the headwaters already,
Yeah.
that would be great, because you've got all the downstream effect as well. That,
Right. So it's just encouraging the farmers to do it,
yes.
seeing the benefit,
Yeah.
and seeing the benefit.
So Sandy, really interesting talk, particularly that context you gave us around Germany versus New Zealand. That was quite fascinating. But hey, you put up a slide there where you had someone had done the analysis based on the riparian planting work that you need to do in different sorts of streams, and there was a map there. My question would be, if we went ahead and achieved 80% of the planting on that map, do we have any feel for the overall difference it would make to biodiversity and potentially other things like recreational water quality and things like that? Do we have any feel at all for the effect of the change that would take place if we were to achieve that?
Probably right now not for the lowland streams. That's always a problem, because we haven't got that anywhere. There is some studies in the Whatawhata catchment where they have whole catchments planted up, and they trialed also native species for forestry, things like those, at a greater scale. So there is a lot of positive outcomes in that sense. But it would probably make a magnitude of a bigger difference here, because we've got so much hotter temperature, so much drier climate. I think the outcome would be even more extreme to shade up if we really had the whole catchment planted up in terms of biodiversity and protection and the cooler water and better water quality. That made, I can imagine that actually the benefit would be greater.
Thank you.
So you need to get cracking with this right through.
It wasn't a leading question, Eric.
Interested in your comments about in those first order and maybe second order streams high up to cool those more quickly. We have huge tracts of forestry, and post-harvest 4 or 5 years, we don't get that protection. So have we any idea of the amount of area that would affect in terms of some of those bits coming in, because we just don't have that planting on buffer or the right type of trees up there?
Oh yes,
So that's what I'm getting.
yeah, definitely. So I wouldn't know if we've got any estimates or studies on that effect. I'm not sure about that. I just think, and I don't even know what the regulation is, you probably know more about that than I do, but having kind of a permanent buffer in the forestry areas in the stream gullies to protect the streams and just keep them shaded and buffer it a bit, I think is the rule. But I'm not sure if that's everywhere or for, I don't know about the regulations in that sense. Yeah, sorry, can't answer that.
I might say that's the last question, just looking at the time. But Sandy's here if you have more questions after.